Let's get to Stanford's schedule, which I view in a different light for the Beavs for this reason, Carter. I am with you that I think this will be a rough year for Stanford because they just went 3-9. Now they've got a new head coach who won a lot at Sacramento State, but Power 5 football, everything's really different. At Sac State, Troy Taylor was running a two-quarterback system. I don't know that you can really do that, or if they're planning to do that at Stanford, my guess would be they probably don't. But I'm not looking through the schedule, combing through to try and find the losses. I'm combing through trying to find the wins. And I do think they'll open with one against Hawaii, who's been a pretty rough Mountain West team. They do have to go to Hawaii, which frankly sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Starting this season with a road game in Hawaii.
When you say they have to go to Hawaii,
yeah. They gotta go to the Hawaiian Islands. Oh gosh darn. But then they go at USC as usual in that road game, and then perhaps their most interesting game of the year is week 3 against none other than Sacramento State. They didn't plan it. It just worked out that way. That Stanford just hired Troy Taylor away from that very place. I think this is a situation where the Cardinal are in a good spot to begin 2-1. And then fortunately for them, they've got 2 home games to begin conference play. But I feel like it's going to be a very, not up and down, but like a solid amount of up for the Cardinal. And then I think the drop-off is going to start once that Oregon game happens.
so similar to Oregon State, I kind of like the home road split here as far as, playing your tough games at home and
Yeah,
playing
it's
your
not
more
bad.
winnable games on the road. Getting Arizona, Oregon, UCLA, Washington, Notre Dame. I mean, all of those games are at home. I don't know how much the home field advantage, we can really factor into that for Stanford. I think the lack of a home field advantage actually played to their favor against Oregon State last year. But getting those games at home is nice. Playing at Hawaii, playing at Colorado, I think those are, you get your more winnable games on the road, which, for a team that's trying to, for a team that's going to be on the lower end, maybe you want your more winnable games at home to kind of like, dial those in. Because I think for Stanford, it lowers the floor, but it also raises the ceiling a little bit. And unfortunately, when we're talking about Cardinal floor and ceiling, we're talking somewhere in the realm of, probably 2 to 4 wins. But I do agree with you. That first 3-week stretch, you could be looking at Stanford at 2-1. But unfortunately, from that point on, I just don't see many more wins. I mean, I think this is probably a 3-win team at best.
I think it could be like Cal from 2022, who also started I think they were 3-1, actually, because their first conference game was also against Arizona, and they got the win. And then after that, things started to go downhill. I could really see that happening, though I think Arizona is a better team than Stanford. And the issue with the Cardinal is they need a complete and total rebuild. They need to change their philosophy. They need to upgrade their personnel. They need better schematics. Like, it's a top to bottom rebuild, but you're now doing that at a place that is, compared to its peers, even compared to Cal, at a competitive disadvantage for adding talent. Yeah, they can still recruit at a solid level, but the recruiting rankings not great this year in a coaching change. That's kind of to be expected. Okay. Well, maybe they can just go grab a few starters from the portal. No, it's Stanford. They've added 1 player from the portal. So they're going to be playing with a lot of the same players who either didn't see the field a lot last year or who did see the field a lot in 2022. But that's a team that struggled to move the ball, that struggled to stop anybody. I mean, there were not really a lot of things that they did well, and they'll be incorporating a new quarterback. It's hard to find. Like, I don't think there's a single game on this schedule, except for probably Sacramento State, that you can look at and go, yep, that's definitely a win. I really don't think there's another one. I think they would beat Hawaii. I don't know, because Stanford was just, I didn't even think they were as good as their 3-9 record indicated this year. They caught Notre Dame at a bad time, and they won a game without scoring a touchdown against a dreadful Arizona State team. Like, those were 2 of their wins.
Yeah, and that's why I think the floor is so low for this team. It's because there are so few quote unquote guaranteed wins. I mean, Colorado, like they're playing them on the road. Arizona's going to be better. I think, missing ASU hurts them. But also the fact that, you've got the Notre Dame factor. Like you see this with USC's schedule every year too. It's going to look a little weird because you have to schedule that game. Stanford's bye week comes 5 weeks in. Like that is not at all when you want to have your bye. You end the season against Notre Dame. Those two rivalry games are both at home, which I guess is kind of advantageous. But
That helps.
Anytime you have to put Notre Dame on that schedule, it limits the amount of wins you can rack up in non-conference because Notre Dame more often than not is going to be pretty good. And I think overall it just kind of throws your schedule out of whack. And I think you see that a little bit here with the fact that you probably only have one or two winnable non-conference games, and then you've got a bye week 5 weeks in. You're probably going to be on the very, very bottom end of the Pac-12 anyways. So, I struggle to see where the wins are coming.
I think with Stanford, there's an unknown element of what Troy Taylor will be able to change right away. How much of it really was in terms of their struggles, just schematical disadvantage, and David Shaw just needed to, move on, and that's certainly what happened. And it, of course, ended in a classy way because it's David Shaw. What else was going to happen and such? But I feel like with Stanford, they were certainly not schematically and play calling wise where they needed to be. I was never a fan of the long mesh. I'm still not a fan of it. I hope they ditch that forever because it's just it didn't work. It was an experiment. They tried it. Did not really work, and I wonder if maybe they were just missing that sort of stuff because they were so committed to that philosophy. Like, could it be a 4-5 win team? I could potentially see it. Their recruiting classes for the last couple of years, most of whom are still on campus, are not horrendously rated, so it's not like they're, like I think they have more talent, for instance, right now than 2022 Colorado. That's not saying a lot, but I look at their team and say 3. Like when you go through and just try to find the games where you feel like they'd have a chance. Hawaii, Sacramento State, I think you have a chance against Arizona. I think you have a chance against Colorado, but right now I'd probably take the Buffs playing in Boulder. Cal and Notre Dame, both. Notre Dame, the rivalry factor. Cal, again, that's like 4 or 5 games where I could reasonably see Stanford winning. Maybe they pull an upset. To me, that just looks like a recipe for 3 to 4 wins.
Totally. I think going back to the scheme element, like the slow mesh is just not a good offense. No. I mean, Wake Forest runs it. Wake Forest was supposed to be a pretty good team last year, and they did not live up to expectations. They had a ton of talent. They just, frankly, were not as good as people thought they would.
Sam Hartman left. Sam Hartman left.
Yeah. Exactly. Like he wanted to get the heck out of there because, I mean, their offense was just not what it was supposed to be. I think Stanford, even if it takes a step back talent-wise, like I think they're going to move the ball better. Troy Taylor's a good offensive coach. They're not going to be running that pitiful offense that they ran last year. I don't think the issue is necessarily David Shaw related. I think he was just trying to figure out, like, what am I supposed to do, man? Like, I can't recruit the guys I want. I can't go to the transfer portal and find help. Like, we've got to try something out of the box a little bit. I think there was probably just, frankly, a bit of a frustration factor there. And I think that is probably also part of why he left, not just the fact that the success on the field had been going in a negative direction. So I'm curious to see what Troy Taylor can do. I know he's gotten some assurances that he's going to be able to use the portal a little bit. I mean, similar to Dion at Colorado, was given certain assurances that it's going to be easier to get talent in. I mean, talk is cheap. We'll see how much of that actually comes to fruition. But no, if Stanford doesn't make those changes that it needs to do, I mean, we're going to be talking about the Cardinal in this same vein every year, being a 2 to 4 win team, probably.
I think they can get back to where, at least closer to where they were in the early 2010s. And just for those listening or watching, frankly, you haven't looked it up, their schedule at Hawaii, at USC, Sac State at home. Then they have Arizona and Oregon to open conference play. I could maybe see them beating Arizona. Probably not Oregon. probably, but Oregon's also had funky things happen on the road there before. Then they go at Colorado, UCLA, and Washington at home. Great to get those games at home, but I just look at the offensive firepower that any Chip Kelly team's going to bring and what Washington brings back, and I'm just like, I just don't think the Cardinal can score enough points or get enough stops, and unless Troy Taylor is a genius, and maybe he
which
is.
It could
be. You never know. I mean, you never know. Maybe they really have been just one coach away. Then at Washington State, tough place to win. At Oregon State, tough place to win. Cal and Notre Dame at home. I think the redeeming quality for this schedule is that they start at home often after those 2 road games against Hawaii and USC, and then they end at home as well with a couple rivalry games in Cal and Notre Dame. And I think if you're Troy Taylor, honestly, you're shooting for 4 wins and beat either Cal or Notre Dame. You win a rivalry game, increase your win total from the year before, and I think you could look back and say successful year 1.
Yeah, successful year for me for Stanford looks like going 2-1 to start the year, winning your 2 non-conference games. Actually, I think a successful year looks like a 3-1 start, going at Hawaii, winning, losing at USC, and probably getting blown out, but then beating Sac State, surprising, getting your surprise win in air quotes against Arizona. I think those first 4 games give you some winnable opportunities, and then, like you said, beating one of Cal or Notre Dame, and I think more likely than not it's Cal. So that's the path to 4 wins. I think more likely you're looking at 2 to 3. Getting Hawaii, Sac State seems reasonable. But I mean, it's not going to be easy to beat Arizona and Cal. Those are home games, but they're, they're decent teams.
Yeah. Like Cal is, I don't think, going to be that good this year, but they're never dreadful. They haven't been for a long time. I don't think they will be this year. And after that Arizona game, Oregon, Colorado, UCLA, Washington State, Oregon State.
Brutal.
Where's the? There's just no real easy game in there when you got Colorado on the road. It's always an easy time though with my man Carter Bahns of BeaverBlitz.com, senior writer and editor over there, and notably mediocre horse player, which one day we'll have to prove in person. Carter, appreciate the time.
Well, I'm glad you're going to let me get the last word here. It's always an easy time, except for when you're on the basketball court, as you will soon find out. So come back over to Oregon. We'll settle these things so that the people don't have to listen to us banter back and forth about it.
Shout out to the listener on YouTube who posed that particular question. Hope we answered it to your satisfaction. Appreciate everyone listening. See you next time. And as always, have a wonderful rest of your day.